These are 9 essential tips you need to know to keep your houseplants happy and healthy. They're what I consider the most important things you need to understand to keep them firing on all cylinders. If you follow these tips properly, then I guarantee you will have plants that you can be proud of in your home. At its most basic level, plants need 3 simple things to thrive: light, water, and nutrients. And that's it. If we can get those things right, then everything else should fall into place, and all of the tips I mentioned in this video touch on these 3 key ingredients. The first of those ingredients that is imperative we get right is water. Get the watering wrong for our indoor plants and they won't be sticking around for a long time. I always try to think back to when I first bought my houseplant many moons ago and what was going through my mind. I can always remember that I didn't really have a clue how to water my plant. And I think this is a really common problem for beginners. I worried far too much about the plant drying out that I would water it pretty much every other day until I had a bit of a mess on my hands. And I wish I had YouTube to refer to back then. The one tip that will really save your bacon and help you get the watering right every time is to always check the soil before watering your plant. We only want to water the plant when the soil has dried out. Really that simple. This is because overwatering is the #1 killer for houseplants, with people watering their plant far too frequently. The roots are the foundations of your plant, and if your foundations are sopping wet, they weaken and they turn to rot, and then your plant ends up collapsing. So check the soil by sticking your finger 2 inches into the soil and feeling for moisture, and only water when the soil feels dry. The soil will be wetter the lower down the pot you go, so if it's moist at the top, it will be wet lower down where the roots are. When you do come to water your plant, make sure you give it a thorough drench. You can't get the soil too wet. You can pour water all over the soil for 2 hours and it will do no harm. It's the not letting it dry out that really does the long-term damage. Some plants are marketed as low light plants, such as the ZZ plant and the snake plant, and this often leads people to keeping their plant in a spot with pretty much 0 light. This will be doing no favours for your plant. All plants, no matter what they are, need natural light to photosynthesize and store energy for growth. It is true that your ZZ plant will be okay in a spot that gets low light, but growth will be limited. You'll just tend to sit there and do nothing. Keep it in a spot that gets medium to high light and you'll see many more stems pop up through the soil. My essential tip here then is to keep your plant in as bright a spot in your home as possible. And this doesn't mean you should keep your plant in a sunny south-facing spot where it gets hours of hot direct sun all day. This will scorch the leaves and lead to its eventual downfall. Indoor plants are generally tropical and hail from the forest floors of tropical rainforests where they get dappled sun throughout the day, so they're not used to having prolonged hours of direct sun on their leaves. Unless you know for certain that your plants thrive in direct sun, like succulents and snake plants, then keep it in indirect sunlight. A pro tip that really takes your plants to the next level, especially if you have a home that lacks lots of natural light, is to supplement with a grow light. I love grow lights. They produce a lovely even light that is suitable for your indoor plants that you're in full control over. You decide how far away the plant is from the light, how many hours it's on for, and even which plants are placed under it. This means you can tailor your setup to get the results you need. If you want a boost in growth, then leave the light on for longer and place your plant nearer to the light. I keep my Califea Elga grass under my Sansi grow bulb that I leave on for 10 hours a day, and it's responded really well. I used to keep it near my west facing window in my living room where I got a couple of hours of direct sun a day and it spat out a couple of leaves with brown tips. Since moving it to the back of the room and placing my grow bulb over it, the leaves look much healthier. And if you're worried about cost, then grow bulbs these days use LED technology, so energy usage is much less than the halogen bulbs back in the day. And check out the description to this video for a link to Sansi with details of a 15% discount you can grab. I mentioned earlier that the roots are the foundation of your plant. We all know that in order to build a house that won't fall down, we need solid foundations, and this is the same for our plants. So many of the problems we often see with our plants, such as yellowing, drooping or mushy leaves, all stem from the roots. If your plant's roots are not happy, then the foliage definitely won't be. So what's the best thing we can do to keep our roots happy? Simply to house them in something they will find comfortable. The makeup of the soil your plant lives in is so important. It needs to be nutrient rich, hold on to water for roots to draw up to the foliage, as well as free draining so that excess moisture doesn't rot the roots. But keep it simple though. I use 2 ingredients for my soil, compost that I buy from my local garden centre, and perlite or pumice, which is added for good drainage. I use about 5 parts compost to 2 parts perlite, and this seems to be the sweet spot for most of my plants. Nutrients is the third basic key ingredient plants need to thrive alongside water and light, so we need compost to provide nutrients to the plant's roots. Compost is also great at retaining water. Perlite, or an equivalent such as pumice or grit, is added to increase drainage so that the soil doesn't hold on to too much moisture, preventing root rot. I'm on a mission to catch up to Plant Arena in subscribers as fast as I can, and we're fast catching up, so please make sure you hit the subscribe button so that we can catch her up by the end of the year. You've got your plant in a bright spot, you've nailed the watering, and the soil mix is perfect. The next thing you need to make sure is that the plant is not root bound. A root bound plant simply means that it has grown too big for the pot it is in. It's as simple as that. Plants can grow pretty big in a year, and people often neglect to up-pot them, meaning that their plant becomes root bound. They then start to see symptoms such as yellowing leaves and a droopy plant and are confused as to why. If it's been a couple of years since you last looked at the roots of your plant, then it's well worth taking it out of its pot and seeing how it's doing. If, when you pull it out, there's a mass of roots with very little soil, then it needs to be potted up into a bigger pot with fresh soil. The plant will be struggling to draw up nutrients because there is no soil left to provide nutrients, which results in yellow leaves, and you'll notice that the plant is much thirstier than normal too. I always recommend checking the plant's roots in spring every year to see if it needs up potting. This sets them up really well for the growing season ahead. This next tip is a secret cheat code for plant care and something most beginners are terrified to do. Can you guess what it is? Pause the video and let me know in the comments. Pruning! I can't emphasize this enough. Don't be scared to prune your plants. They love it, and you'll end up with a healthier plant because of it. If you're not happy with the way your plant is growing, maybe it's growing in the wrong direction, simply give it a prune. Cutting a stem sends a signal to the plant that it needs to redistribute that growth energy elsewhere on the plant, and this is normally the next growth node down. The cheat code part of it is that it normally grows 2 new stems to replace the one you cut, so you end up with a bushier plant. This is most apparent on a jade plant. They always grow 2 new stems where you make a cut, and this allows you to really control the direction of growth. Pruning is particularly important for damaged or diseased leaves. If a leaf is turning yellow, then don't hesitate to cut it out. It's no longer providing anything for the plant, and is in fact stealing nutrients from the rest of the plant. And don't be scared to prune any time of the year too. You won't hurt the plant by pruning in winter, you just won't see rapid growth until spring, which is fine. I talked earlier about our indoor plants hailing from the tropics, and this is significant because this means they never get exposed to prolonged cold temperatures. The essential tip therefore is to not allow your plants to get exposed to temps below 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit, otherwise you'll see issues like leaf drop, drooping leaves or yellowing leaves. And this starts from when you purchase the plant in store. If it's cold outside, make sure the shop assistant wraps the plant up properly to protect it from the elements. And don't leave it in the car in the cold to do your weekly shop. Your plant really won't like this. Folks are often confused when their plant deteriorates as soon as they bring it home, and this is usually the reason. And if you're going away for a few days during the winter, then it's also a good idea to set a minimum temperature for your house if you can, to avoid your plants freezing to death. Oh, and in winter, keep your plants away from radiators and external doors. The daily shift in temperatures and humidity will do no favours for the plant. Nutrients is one of the 3 key ingredients I mentioned at the beginning of this video, and having your plants on a fertilizer schedule is so important for healthy growth. Sadly though, not enough people are doing this. Plants need 3 macronutrients: nitrogen for growth, phosphorus to fight disease, and potassium for strong roots. A good balanced fertilizer is important to allow your plants to access all 3, as well as some beneficial micronutrients. I use a balanced liquid feed, but I am considering switching to a granular mix so that I can work into the soil and make my life easier, and I feed at least once a month during the growing season of spring and summer. It's important to follow the guidance on the packet to your feed so that you avoid the risk of over-fertilizing your plants. Don't fertilize during the winter, because your plant isn't growing and it won't use the nutrients you give it. Pests are a secret houseplant killer and unfortunately a fact of life for all of us. If you have a collection of plants, then you'll no doubt come into contact with these annoying little critters. Spotting them early and knowing what to do when you do can mean a difference between conquering a problem on one plant or losing an entire batch of plants in your home. This is because plant pests have a nasty habit of spreading. Houseplant pests come in many different guises, but the most popular ones are our friends, the fungus gnats, spider mites, mealybugs, or thrips. Fungus gnats are the most common and difficult to get rid of, but also the least damaging to our plants, whereas others are less common but literally suck the life out of our plants. The essential tip then is to understand the types of pests out there and regularly check your plants for signs of them. And to do that, make sure you click on the link here.